Hey, fun show today. I'm going to be talking to Howard Beck about Cavs' best free agency fits, Jarrett Allen's trade market, and more. I want to tell you to download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Joining us now is Howard Beck. You can catch him on Mondays on Locked On NBA. You've read him at GQ right now, a ton of other places. Howard, thanks again for coming back to Locked On Cavs.
Good to see you again, Chris. Thanks.
So, quick bit of, I don't know if you've seen this yet. This is a quick bit of very minor news, but the Cavs have guaranteed Cedi Osman's salary for next year. Any strong feelings one way or the other on Cedi Osman?
No strong feelings on Cedi Osman. The transaction that might have the least amount of impact on what happens over the next 24 to 48 hours. But good to lock in a guy that I'm not going to say lock in. Good to just kind of have this. You've got some cost certainty there. He's at a reasonable deal. He's been part of the group for a while. Like, okay, it's fine. And I do think that we'll get to this later. But as they're trying to figure out other ways to improve the roster, that's a very movable piece. So
yeah, $6.7 million, I believe. You can stack that up with other deals. They don't have that big salary to send out, so that's at least useful for that. I think they did try to use this before it hit the guaranteed date, so then they could trade it. Another team could save like nearly $7 million, but maybe the market wasn't there. Maybe they actually are. They're probably saying very
Today's
nice things
episode
about
is brought to you by PrizePicks, where first-time users
might not be
can
true.
get a
All right,
bonus. Tell you more about that in a minute.
Like
So
the
how
big
does it
Cavs
work?
player,
2 to 6 players,
figuratively
they score more or
and
less.
literally,
Their
Howard,
prize
and that has been
projections,
talked about
you
as a
win. You put
trade
up
chip recently
25
is Jarrett
times
Allen.
your money on
If
an
you were
entry,
Cleveland
still
at this
competing
point in
against other
time,
people. It is just you versus the
would you
projections
look
available.
at all trading
Projections
Jarrett
off
Allen?
of
Would this be
projections
the
on
summer,
any
the
sport
moment
that
where you
watch.
say,
This
okay,
includes
let's
the
cash
NBA,
in Jarrett
NFL,
Allen and
MLB,
pivot to more of Evan Mobley
WNBA,
full-time as our five?
PGA, MMA, boxing, disc
I
golf,
don't know
indoor
that we're
basketball,
there
and
yet.
more. Answers can be made in 60 seconds.
Given
or
the
less.
flame
It's
out
that
against
easy.
the Knicks in the
They offer
playoffs,
safe
and I was there
fast
for
withdrawals. Currently
a
operational
few of those
over 30
games
states
here in New
and
York.
Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to PrizePicks.com.
You don't want to
sign
overreact
up
to
for
that,
daily
and you don't want to make
fantasy
decisions
sports.
based on it.
First-time users can receive 100% instant
But I
deposit
looked
match
at that,
up
or I
to
watched that
$200
unfold,
with the promo code
and I
LOCKEDON. If you
thought
deposit
Evan
100,
Mobley is
PrizePicks
not
will
quite
give you
ready
100. If you deposit
to be
50,
that front court
PrizePicks will
anchor
give you
yet.
50. Don't forget
Jarrett
to enter
Allen
that
didn't
promo
look like
code
he was
LOCKEDON
ready
and
to
sign
be the
up.
front court anchor either,
Deposit
which
match
was
up
a
to
problem.
100.
I think there's a future in concept where Evan Mobley is your, I don't want to say small ball five, whatever. He's just a five. Like he can be the five somewhere in the future. I don't know that we have enough data, and the Cavs have more than you and I do, to decide that that's okay now. But there's another path, right? Jarrett Allen, given how young he still is, and how accomplished he still is, and how reasonable that contract still is a really good trade chip. I don't think you trade him on the premise today of Evan Mobley being your full-time starting center. I think if you trade Jarrett Allen, either you're trying to bring back a cheaper center in that deal along with other stuff, because they got a lot of stuff to do. They got a lot of roles to fill and a bench to replenish. Or you're trading Jarrett Allen for some combination of players who help you accomplish that, and then you're going and signing, a minimum salaried, I don't know, Andre Drummond or somebody, right? Like your standard garden variety plug-in five who doesn't play full-time minutes because you're going to move Evan Mobley there for a lot of minutes every night anyway. And I'm not suggesting Andre Drummond's the answer. I don't have all the centers.
That'd be a homecoming, by the way.
There you go.
Bring him back.
So there, there's some, in today's NBA, centers are either at the top end or the bottom end for the most part, salary-wise, it feels like. So getting somebody else that you could have as your stand-in at the five to play 20 minutes a night shouldn't be that difficult. But again, I haven't gone that deep on who the potential replacements would be if you traded Jarrett Allen. I think it's tricky. I think, like I say, I feel like it's too soon to trade him. And as bad as it looked in the playoffs, we all know how effective Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley were as a tandem. And that's the backbone of their defense. And you take that away, I'd be really hesitant to do that and take that risk.
I agree. I look at Evan Mobley through the vein of Evan Mobley more than anything else. And I don't know if he is ready or it's be like worth it physically to just say, hey, you don't have to bang with 30 minutes a night and take on that bruising at this point of his career. That, like, I think about him and AD in that context, because there was the whole thing with AD for the longest time that he didn't want to play center, that he didn't want to take on some of that. And, like, I understand it to some degree because it is a physically taxing thing to take on. And Mobley does all this other stuff. It would change your defensive scheme. I also think, to your point, I don't know if you're getting the right quality of center back to make it worth it. Like, so one of the teams, Jake Fisher had this, that the Pelicans called about Jarrett Allen. Let's say it's like Jonas Valanciunas is the center you have coming back. I don't know if that moves, that gets me, unless you're not getting Trey Murphy back, right? Yeah. So is the adjustment you're making to your center spot worth the wing you're getting? I would argue it's probably not going to be in the trade. The center market, with where it is, it's just, it's hard to find that exact thing. And the wing market is up here, the center market's here.
Yeah.
I don't think you're getting equal value back in these kind of trades as of right now.
Probably not. But I think the other thing we have to keep in mind is, one, is there an assumption long-term that Evan Mobley becomes the starting center? I think probably. I think if you're looking ahead, eventually that's where this franchise is headed. Probably. Yeah. I also think, looking ahead, you have 4 players who all will be making or expecting somewhere near the max. And in today's NBA, you cannot have 4 max players. You just can't. You could try. Good luck. Good luck dealing with all aprons and second aprons and oven mitts and all the other stuff that's coming with the new CBA and all the restrictions and all the cap exceptions you're going to lose and all the trade abilities you're going to lose and all the other tools you're going to lose by being too high of a spender. And of course, Cleveland's also a smaller market, so I don't think they want to be there anyway because of the luxury tax concerns. So I do think, listen, we should be realistic about this. Sometime in the next couple of years, it's going to have to be at most 3 of those guys and not 4 for cap reasons alone and cap management reasons alone. That leads to some other discussions, which we could come back to. But
when then this topic on this, just you said this about the playoffs, and I think it's right, but just to ask it kind of point blank, would trading Allen now would be selling him at the lowest possible point of his value in some ways, correct? Like, just considering he just got kind of spanked in the playoffs, where it's like, okay, Mitchell Robinson and Isaiah Hartenstein did that to him. So what does that do, I guess, to the perception of Allen in that context?
I don't know that it's a great question. I haven't asked that specific question to folks around the league, so I'm just going to take a stab at it off the top of my head. I think the overall profile of Jarrett Allen and the overall impression of him and his value, I think, remains high. I don't think a single playoff series flame out is going to overly impact that. And given the dearth of impactful centers in this league, And look, maybe even through the lens of, hey, Joel Embiid's the reigning MVP. No, Jokic was second, and he's now Finals MVP. If you're a team in either conference trying to get through, the Sixers with Embiid and the Bucks with potentially a re-signed Brook Lopez, the West with Jokic there, Jarrett Allen would look pretty attractive to a lot of teams. I'm not saying like he's built to stop either of those guys. Nobody is, but I do think that Jarrett Allen's value endures despite the playoff flame out. So I think you could get a decent amount back. And besides that, he's on a reasonable contract for a guy who's been an all-star in recent memory. So I'm not worried about that part of it. I think it's more about what you're losing and how the composition of your defense changes if you don't have him there as the tag team partner for Evan Mobley.
All right, coming up next, best free agent fits for the Cavs. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, where first-time users can get a bonus. Tell you more about that in a minute. So how does it work? You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projections, you win. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It is just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes the NBA, NFL, MLB, WNBA, PGA, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter that promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Howard, I'm going to start with a name who might be out of their price bracket based on the latest reporting out there. That's Max Strus. This, to me, would be one of the first calls if I'm Kobe Altman and Mike Gansey. I'm making first call I'm making when you legally can make calls, even though we know they make calls before. That's how this works. That's how we know that the Indiana Pacers, let's say, might pay Max Strus more than mid-level exception. But even if he's not like the perfect size defensive three, he would just fit, I think, so much of what they need if he actually was going to be obtainable for the MLE.
If obtainable for the mid-level exception, yeah, he's the perfect fit. My buddy Mark Stein has the Pacers, as you mentioned, going full bore at Max Strus, and the Pacers are a team with cap room, so that, he may be priced out of the mid-level exception market for all the teams that would be chasing him, which is a lot of teams, I suspect. So I don't know that Max Strus is gettable. I think the last time I was on the pod, I might have thrown this particular hand grenade into the discussion. Did I throw out the Dylan Brooks heart attack last time?
You did, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be an option, but that
Probably
has
not.
something that has something that has stuck with me because I've thought about that more than Dylan Brooks has been in my head a little bit.
More than is healthy?
Let's say that.
Yeah,
probably.
I mean, it sounds like, again, and Stein had this as recently as this morning, that it sounds like Dylan Brooks to the Rockets is got some serious momentum behind it. Not that anybody has had any discussions of substance now, because that would be illegal. Of course, that hasn't happened. But if as risky as Dylan Brooks is, I still think, like, if I were the Cavs, that I'd be willing to make that move. If he's not available, and if Josh Hart is re-signing with the Knicks, which I still think is more likely than not, because he's another guy I like for the Cavs. If Max Strus is going to Indiana or somewhere else that can pay him more. I was on with Zach Lowe earlier this week, and I think it was Zach, like, after 50,000 conversations in a given week, they all start to blur together. I think it was Zach who suggested the possibility of a Cedi Osman for Royce O'Neal swap.
As someone who listened to that podcast, he did say that. I can
yes.
confirm that you're not hallucinating things that Zach Lowe said to you.
It's a very fine line for me between what's actually happened in my hallucinations and my blurring
I get it. It's that time of year. I get it.
Even with like these Max Strus Indiana thing, I'm like, that was Stein, right? I think so. Like we are on information overload these days, and so between podcasts, other conversations, talking to people around the league, and then everything I've read, it's like I don't remember what was where anymore. I just need 50,000 Post-it notes on the wall behind my laptop here, so I have reference points. I thought that was an interesting idea. I also think the Nets are just an interesting potential trade partner anyway, because I don't know where the Nets are headed specifically, and I don't know if they do either. Are they, waiting on the Dame thing? Probably. If they're all in on trying to trade for Dame, how many of these pieces are still around? But like, they have a surplus of like 3-and-D guys and wings, and like Royce O'Neal's on an expiring. Joe Harris, a one-time Cavalier, is on an expiring. I think he could be interesting for them. Yuta Watanabe is a free agent, again, from the Nets. Like, I think he could be interesting for the Cavs. George Niang is an interesting possibility, and I think a good fit. Moving out of the Nets lane. Move back to the Nets lane. Seth Curry would be a fun bench addition, like not by position. Like I'm still thinking through the lens of a forward first, a small forward especially.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking, like, so one of the things that's in the Cavs' favor here, it's not just in their favor, it's in everybody's favor, is that because everybody is trying to duck tax lines and aprons and all this stuff, there are going to be players that in the past cost a lot more that are now, I I'll be curious to see how this goes and how angry they're all going to be. There may be a lot of players in the market who just have to settle for, if not, probably not the full cap mid-level exception, but like a piece of the mid-level or minimums.
Yeah.
Like, what's Kelly Oubre going to cost at this stage in this tight market? Could you get him for the minimum? I look at names like that where like guys who have a lot of starting experience and some playoff experience and are veterans who, because the market is getting squeezed and everyone's living in fear of all these new rules, might come cheap.
That leads me to something I wanted to make sure we hit on a little bit here, we do have this new CBA, and it does seem like it is impacting spending, and then you have one team, the Phoenix Suns, who are like, there's a new CBA, we have to be conscious about like how we build our roster and draft. What are draft picks? That would seem to me, if you're Cleveland, even with Max Strus or some of these other guys still getting priced out because there are teams with the cap space, it does seem like you might get a little bit like luckier. Lucky's maybe the wrong word, but just the circumstances of the market would drive you to a certain place where you can get some guys. Like, could you get TJ Warren on a flyer on a minimum? Could you get, what is Watanabe had a really nice year and who I really like for Brooklyn last year? Could you get him really cheap as a result? Like, these are some things in that middle class of players that I wonder if that does. I mean, they split up the mid-level into like two guys and call it going home, and it's not perfect fits, but it's good enough to kind of bridge them a year as Evan Mobley gets older and all that stuff.
If I'm one of those players, by the way, the first team that offers me the full mid-level exception, I am taking it, because a handful of those are going to go out, and then the teams with cap room are going to be spent. The teams that have mid-level exceptions that want to spend them are going to be spent, and then all of a sudden, like, there's going to be that musical chairs thing where suddenly they're probably just not going to be enough cap room or exceptions available, and everybody's going to be scrambling to just take minimum deals. Like if I'm a Yuta Watanabe or a Kelly Oubre, the first team that offers me, something approaching the full mid-level, I don't care where it is, I'm taking it.
I agree. So Kelly Oubre, he would be to me like one of those names that I think if you got him for part of the mid-level or whatever it is, imperfect because the three-point shot isn't like quite at the level you'd want it, but size-wise, I think you could absolutely talk yourself into that being a good defensive, bigger 3-4 type to bring in and work with next year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't scrolled through everything, but just this morning, kind of like workshopping this to come on the pod. Like, I was just looking at guys who, especially starting there, right? Just anybody who has the outline of a 3-and-D small forward is where I'm starting, because that to me was the biggest gap on in the lineup. But obviously they've got a whole bench to fill out too. So for a team that finished fourth in the East, I feel like they still have a lot of work to do and decisions to make. And I do wonder how much they're already thinking about what we talked about earlier, which is, where is this eventually leading when you have four players who are all going to be either at the max level or expecting max sometime in the near future?
I'll hit you with one other name, Dante DiVincenzo. He's a guard, so it's certainly not the most, maybe not the forward type, but I really like his game, and I feel like he can scale up a little bit. See, he's out there. It doesn't seem like he's going back to Golden State. What would you make of a flyer on DiVincenzo, or maybe not a flyer if you're paying him like $8 million, but what would you make of DiVincenzo?
I don't mind that at all. I'll be curious to see, like, we do this thing often, in June, where we're speculating on what guys are going to make them. It's often really impossible to know until the market actually opens and we see what teams are willing to do. Is somebody going to give DiVincenzo the full mid-level? Not impossible. He fits with every team. Like, he's just a really nice piece. He's not their position of biggest need, but you're right. Like, he's versatile. He can play with and he can play up a little bit, but you're not plugging him in as your starting small forward. Your team's gonna be really small if you're playing him next to Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. But he could play off of either of those guys as you're mixing and matching through the course of the rotation. I like him, and sometimes I don't know if this is one of those cases. Sometimes it's best to just get the guy you can get if he's an impact player of some sort, and not worry about position so much and try to figure that out later. But I gotta think they're looking at small forwards first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree. All right, after this, we're gonna just look ahead a little bit. Where do the Cavs stack up in the East? Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. That's my new favorite way to buy tickets. It makes buying tickets to your favorite events easy, not stressful, makes it really easy to find. You can forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. You get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price, so if you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. You get images of your seats before you buy, so you know exactly what you expect before you arrive. Buy your tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Howard, it's obviously free agency has not happened yet. We'll see where the Bucks and the Celtics, now that they have Porzingis, and the 76ers and the Knicks who beat the Cavs and the Heat and all these teams, what they do. Does Dame Lillard end up in Miami? Obviously will have big implications on what these looks like. But right now, you project out to next year a little bit. If you're Cleveland, how do you feel about how you stack up with the hierarchy in the East? Maybe not in a playoff sense, because we saw how that went this year. Maybe you got to prove something there, but at least in terms of how do you feel about them as far as can they maybe replicate what they just did?
I look at them kind of the same way I look at the Sacramento Kings, 2 teams that have had recent breakthroughs where really nice season, and I wonder if even just standing still causes you to sink, because in both conferences you have a bunch of teams that were below the 2 teams, Cavs and Knicks, or Cavs in the East and Kings in the West, a bunch of teams below them who are arguably got more talent and just had weird seasons, bad seasons, or improved along the way or made deals along the way. So, you know, a lot's going to happen in the next couple of days, and it's going to change this picture potentially dramatically. If we assume that the Bucks keep Middleton and Brook Lopez, if we assume that Harden's going back to the Sixers, if we assume that Josh Hart's going back to the Knicks, the tough part is this. I don't know if the Cavs are still even 4th. If you, through the most negative lens, the most skeptical lens, they lost to the 5th place team badly. So you could say, well, the Knicks should be ahead of them. And then you go one step further. Well, the team that was in 7th and then eventually 8th through the play-in is the team that represented the East in the NBA Finals. The Heat could be ahead of them. Now, again, the Heat have a lot of question marks and some issues of their own to deal with, and they may be losing Max Strus, and they still got to try to figure out a way to keep him, keep Gabe Vincent. Are they the team that gets Damian Lillard? There's a lot of questions. But the Heat obviously had a better finish than the Cavs did. So, again, the most skeptical view of this, you could leapfrog the Knicks and Heat both over the Cavs, and suddenly they're no better than 6th. The Hawks are better than the record indicated, and I think they will be better with a full season under Quinn Snyder, and they're going to make more moves this summer too. I have no doubt about that. And I don't know where the Nets land in all this, right? Like, the Nets are a team that's behind the Cavs, and as of right now, still will be. But the Nets have all those picks to deal with as trade chips. They have all those excess 3-and-D guys, as I mentioned. They're a Damian Lillard destination potentially. So, yeah, Cavs can't stand still. Nobody can in this league. But for a top 4 team, I feel like things are a little more tenuous than the standings at the end of last season suggest.
I am really curious to see how aggressive they end up trying to be, because they don't have a ton of stuff to go out and throw it around and make moves. Like, they don't have first round picks to trade right now. They don't have even a Jordan Poole's contract obviously just kind of got salary dumped, but they don't even have like a ascending-ish young player to kind of send out in a deal in this case, unless a team like loves Dean Wade or something. I don't think you have. I don't think anyone's like breaking down the door trying to guys Okoro right now, who extension eligible, by the way. And I wonder if they just decide, okay, we got to move him on for someone we trust in the playoffs in some way, shape, or form this summer. I wonder if that's something that happens. I'm really curious to see like how far they push it and how much they bank on kind of what they preach at the end of the season, which is this is a young team. It's our first year. We have, that was Darius Garland's first playoff run. That was Evan Mobley's first playoff run. Does running it back and kind of being patient, does that pay off for us in a way? That's what I wonder if they come back to that, or if that's what they at least put out there to sell because the market for them just like isn't there on some of these guys that really maybe could help them elevate
That's what I'm trying to reassure myself with if I'm the Cavs or Cavaliers fans. Like, I'm trying to reassure myself that as ugly as the ending was, and as much as, look, the Heat are lurking and the Knicks are getting better and the Nets could get better and the Hawks I would be reassuring myself with the fact that Darius Garland and Evan Mobley just made their playoff debut. They're both really young and on the rise, and they're both guys who could be all-stars for the rest of their careers. And I'm just going to count on the fact that internal improvement with a few key additions will be just fine. But I do think, like, there's two things that I think are just on the horizon. One, which I mentioned earlier, is the idea that you do have four guys who all could be max players, and you cannot afford to keep them all long term. Like, that's just a reality. At some point, they're going to have to divest themselves of at least one of those guys, I believe. The other piece is, and I can't remember if I threw this particular hand grenade on the last time I was on this podcast. My Garland Mitchell concerns. I'm not sold on small backcourts long term. I believe there's plenty of data over recent NBA history to suggest that that's not the best path to, finals contention or championship contention. And, it's only 1 year in. I don't want to, and Garland had missed a bunch of games. I don't want to, judge it yet. It's kind of like the Gobert Towns thing where it's like, it didn't, like in that case, it didn't look great, but also they only had like a third of the season. There was much more of a sample size for Garland Mitchell. But one of the things that struck me in that Knicks series, aside from Garland looking a little deer in headlights at times, which again, understandable, was your stars, your best players, your most talented players, your highest paid players. To get the most out of them, it's not just a matter of having guys like that. It's having them be able to leverage each other's talents to make each other and the rest of the roster better. And I just don't know that we have that much evidence yet that Mitchell and Garland are doing that, as opposed to kind of taking turns and having and again, we've seen versions of that throughout NBA history and recent NBA history. Like, it's not an unusual challenge. Two guys who are ball dominant. Even with the best of intentions, it's not a matter of being selfish. It's just a matter of sometimes it's just hard to do. And I do wonder if long-term that's actually the most sensible allocation of resources. Or if those are both max players, and they are, maybe you're better off with only one max ball-dominant guard, and the other max on your roster should be a rangy small forward or a power forward or whatever, right? Like, that's... I don't want to oversimplify it to every team that has two maxes or two stars needs to go big, small, but that tends to be the more logical alignment than small, especially with a small backcourt that clearly has a defensive challenge based on their size. And again, the offensive fit. I do not want to judge it too early, but I do think it's worth putting a pin in as kind of a long-term thing to keep an eye on.
How much of this, as kind of a last thing, depends on how good Evan Mobley gets and if he ascends to being the second best player, the best player on this group in a year, 2 years? How much is just going to be decided by where Evan Mobley ends up? I think there's a best case scenario here where Darius Garland and Evan Mobley both reach their full potential in the near term, next couple of years, and they're both max guys. And as we've seen around the league with all the salary dumps we've already seen and all the salary dumps yet to come, this may be the summer of the salary dump. Having two max guys might be the limit, especially for a smaller market team. And their future probably should be Garland and Mobley, which means that at some point it's not Mitchell and Allen. Would be very curious to see the Mitchell. Look, the Mitchell thing is a year away. That's not a fun thing for us to speculate on, but he has like an option in a year. You might know a year from now, like what he wants to do or where he wants to be.
And you might get a lot done before then, right? Like, this is why I'm saying, like, I'm hedging here. Like, I'm saying, like, I don't want to go too far down this road because it's too soon for that discussion. Yeah. But I guarantee you, without having bugged their office, that at some level, because that's what a smart front office does, and they're a smart front office. You are always gaming out everything. And especially, you've got a cap guy on every team who's coming to you on a semi-regular basis saying, hey, boss, just want to kind of put this on your radar here. By 2025, we're going to be paying $200 million in luxury taxes and losing all of our cap exceptions if we continue on this course with these 4 guys, right? Those are numbers I'm just throwing out there off the top of my head. But that's what you do. You game it out and you look ahead and you try to anticipate and you try to make preemptive or proactive moves. And I'm not saying this is the time to do that, but I will say this, because nothing in this league shocks me. So I'm not saying this as a prediction by any stretch. It wouldn't shock me if they traded Jarrett Allen this summer, because at some point they're going to have to start to figure out how to navigate not just what the best roster is to win in the present, but what the most sustainable one is with respect to this new CBA.
Howard Beck, you can catch him on Twitter as long as Twitter is like a functioning place to be at Howard Beck. You can read him at GQ and catch him on Mondays on Locked On NBA. Howard, thanks so much for coming.
Always a pleasure, Chris.
Locked On
Thanks.
Cavs.